Okay, let's start the floating positioning exercise. I'll let you read this stuff. Due date, parade is due right away. It's due Monday. Your project folder, yes, as normal, your root folder with your last name, download, and then rename a float exercise HTML for Moodle, and then this image, Jack 400 by 400. That's 400 pixels by 400 pixels. That's why I named it that way. And I want you to go ahead and, as the instructions say, open up the HTML document that you've renamed in Notepad++ in Chrome, I suggest, and you can view it, and then the instructions continue. But instead of that, why don't you play along with me, and you can get my ideas and do the exercise at the same time. So I'm in Notepad++. I'm going to run that file now, and here it is. If you look through with it, look through the display here, or look through the HTML, which you probably should, you'll see that there is the beginnings of a navigation area here. It's in a list. Why is it in a list? We'll learn more about navigation later, but this will be your first introduction to it too. We almost always start with navigation as a list because it is a list, semantically, right? It's a list of pages. So we like to start it actually as a list, and then we'll convert it and style it so it flows out horizontally and so on. You'll see I have some contact information jammed in here into a paragraph. You'll see I've got these paragraphs called paragraph left and right, which will end up being like columns. You'll see there's some warning stuff at the bottom, and then something that's called a footer at the bottom too. So let's continue. Let's go into the in Notepad++ and take a look at this. And here's that navigation area. See, it's just a list of links. These are dummy links. That's what the hashtag does. It creates dummy links. But if I had real links to interior other pages, I would have them in here. And I give that whole thing a, I've given the UL an ID of nav, which would be important for me to be able to designate these links different from other links on the page. You'll see I have some other IDs, some other divs and IDs and so on through as you look through the span of that contact information, and then that paragraph ID left, ID right for the next paragraph, and then some IDs on the footer and on the warning too. That's how I can get to that stuff. Okay. So your instructions first say to get a photo onto the page. So let's do this. Let's put that photo in. And where it's going to go, I want to put it right here, right after the P of the first paragraph. Remember, images are inline elements. They like to go inside block elements. Remember how you do it? IMG, SRC, equals, quotation marks. And the alt text would go here. We'll skip the alt text for now. What is the SRC? Remember, that's the path. Our path is pretty simple because our file is sitting right there. When you're working on floating your own images into your own resume, your path may be a little more complicated, slightly, because you have an images folder. So for you, it would be images / and then the name of the photo. Maybe even more subfolders beyond that, and then more slashes and folder names. But ours is just the name of the photo, which is, if you didn't change it, Jack 400.jpg, right? Photo of, oops, save, sorry, save. Photo of me, let's run it. Hey, that's not a photo of me. That's a photo of Richard Gere. Probably not much resemblance. I should shave. In any case, there's a photo, but look at the display. It's pretty awkward, right? It just sits, it's in the paragraph, but it just sits at the top of it. It pushes everything around. It's not a very attractive display. So what are we going to do? We're going to float it. What are we going to float? We're going to float the IMG. There's only one image on this page, so we can just designate IMG. But you're going to have more images, so you're going to probably give them divs or whatever. Remember, I could stick a div in here. I'm sorry, not divs, but, well, maybe there'll be divs around them. But, I mean, IDs. This could be an ID with, you know, the word Jack or something like that, or Richard Gere for that matter. Okay, let's not worry about that. But for our purposes, we're going to call this, we're going to go to the CSS area. Remember, floating is part of a CSS function. You can look through the rest of the CSS if you wish. I'm going to go to the note that says to do it here, because I created that for you. And here we go. Let's float. Float. Let's do float left first. That's all there is. That's the float command. Just float right, float left. Those are your choices. Run, launching Chrome. See the difference? It was sitting on top of the paragraph. Now the text goes around it. That's starting to look a little better. Let's change it to float right, and then let's add some margins around the around. We don't want margin on the top. We don't want to push into this thing. We want margins here and here and maybe here. Here we go. So we're going to go, let's make it actually float right, as I said. You can see the difference then, and we'll go ahead and do margin 0 to EM, EM. I'm going to copy that. So we got top, 0, right, bottom, left, right? Always a semicolon, don't forget it. Don't need a space. I absolutely don't want spaces in here, right? Okay, let's save that and run it. Here we are. So there's that the margin that we put on, right? It pushes the text away here. It pushes over here, but it doesn't matter or anything. We don't want the margin on the top to push in anything that should be above there. So we've floated our photo, and that's all there is to floating photos. If you had a cut line on here, well, yes, then you would put this whole thing in a div, and you would float the div. Okay? Not necessary in this case, though. We just stick the photo there. Now, your photos on your website, they should be floated. Yes, I suppose you could maybe display a photo over a heading like you used to do with that silhouette image, but it's probably more attractive to float your photos into the copy. Okay, let's continue along then. What do we do next? Let's float that contact information. In the CSS, we're going to go, remember the contact information? This is it right here, right? It's just sitting in a paragraph. Okay, good. If I look at it in the HTML, there it is. There's a span called contact. So if I give it an ID of contact, we can simply go to this place with the ID of contact. I've made these already for you to use. And what are we going to do? Well, we want to float it, but we have to give it width to float. Text has to be given width. It could be a percentage width. That would be okay, but let's just go ahead and give it a hard unit. 200 px. Good. And so that's going to float it, but let's make it stand out a little bit more. Let's give it a background. Well, first, that isn't going to float it. We have to float it. Float left. And let's give it a background color, right? Of white. Oops. And let's see what that did. There it is. There's our contact information. It is now floating within this paragraph, but you can see how it's been separated out. I could use some padding there, right? Which would be space inside so this text is not touching the edge of the box. And maybe some margin also so that this text is not pushing the box too. So what are we going to do? I suggest we do something like, I could use pixels for this padding and margin, or I could use EMs. Whatever you want to do, you should be kind of consistent though. Margin, I'm going to go with the same idea, but we don't need any left margin in this case. Top is okay though. So I'm going to go to EM because that's what I used before. So I want to kind of place a repetition would be good. And 0. Let's see what happens with that. And semicolon. So I've got my margin around there. I've got my padding inside the box. Now, could you display your contact information like this on your resume pages? Would you like to float it inside a paragraph on each page or something like that? I think that would be fine. Of course, these would be linked, but you could do that. As opposed to just having it go down to the bottom in your footer. That'd be fine too. You could do that. Does it have to have a background color? No. It could just have, I could just use the border and make like a box around it essentially. Change the size, color, style of the box as I wish. I could do a fancy, make rounded corners too. You could read about making rounded corners. It's in your text, or you can look for it online. What are we going to do next? So let's make some columns. We're going to go to the CSS that controls these two paragraphs, right? And we're going to move them around a little bit. So here they are, left and right. Remember, that's these two paragraphs down here at the bottom, which are called left and right. There they are. Okay. And away we go. We're going to do is, there's a lot of ways to do this, as your instructions say. We could make one element go to the left, another one go to the right, but first they need widths. So in the CSS for the right one, let's set it to float right and the width to 400 pixels. So here we go. I'm in the right one, and I'm going to go width of 400 pixels. Remember, it's text, so we have to give it a width. I'm going to say float right. And for the left one, let's also give it a width of 400 pixels and float left. Oops. Save and run. Okay, what happened? Well, we did get our left one is over here. You see it's over 400 pixels. And we got our right one over here. It's over 400 pixels. That's fine. But what's going on here? This stuff is the footer, and it's jamming up in here. Why is it happening? Well, remember, once you start floating, you have to tell it, you often have to say, when do you stop floating? This is a clear situation. We need to clear this stuff. So let's go do that now. On our footer, we want to clear both. Save that and run it. Okay, now my footer has gone back to where it's supposed to be. But here's the problem. If I make this smaller, see what happens? My paragraphs no longer float, right? What this is called is a float drop, because they're based on hard units. Why don't we try using some percentages instead? Let's make the right one width of 45%. And let's make the left one a width of 45%. And let's take the, on the left one, let's put a margin right of 5% to make the spacing between them a little bit. When we do percentages, we can make them come up to 100% total in an area would be all you'd want to use, right? Sometimes we use a little bit less than 100% just to keep things safe so we don't get a float drop. So let's save this and run it. Here we go. We've got a left, a right, and the space in between. Okay, but what happens when we make the page smaller? Guess what? We still have a left and a right and the space in between. They didn't drop down because we used percentages. Okay, let's continue along. By the way, before we do the positioning, let's take a look at the footer and give it a little more styling. How about a background color? Of hashtag FFF, you should guess what that is. And padding 1EM. Save and run that. And there's my footer. Okay, let's move on to the absolute positioning in second part.